So, Burn the Witch Chapter 2 is upon us, the newest chapter of Kubo's limited run series, which apparently we are already halfway done with. It's only going to be 4 chapters long, for now at least. Whether that remains true in the future is yet to be seen. But with the way the story is unfolding and the way the world building is continually being piled on, it really is difficult to see this being wrapped up in 4 chapters in a way that leaves us, the fans, satisfied. So, we're going to get into the review now for Chapter 2. As always, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this week's chapter, and let's get on with this. Before we begin, however, guys, if you haven't subbed to my channel, make sure to hit that button now. You're in the perfect place for weekly Bleach content and Burn the Witch reviews as well. So if you like that sort of thing, make sure to hit the sub button and the notification bell to ensure you get all of my videos when they enter the sub box every week. Don't forget to join the community as well, guys. Follow me on Twitter. The name is on screen below. And also don't forget to join the Discord as well. We're about 650 members strong now. And they're all just people who absolutely love Bleach and Burn the Witch and all of Kubo's work, and we're all really excited for the future of his franchises. So I have to be honest, 2 chapters into a 4-chapter limited run series, I wasn't really expecting to be saying this, but there's not a huge amount to talk about at this week's chapter. One of the more prominent issues with Kubo's writing over the years has always been that he has indulged himself quite heavily in build-up and spent a lot of time building the world, creating the lore, and just building and building and building until we get to the climax and it's over in a flash. And I'm kind of concerned that maybe we might be heading to a similar situation here, considering the amount of characters that Kubo built up over the last chapter, introducing even more characters in this chapter, and apparently the series is over in 2 weeks. Makes me wonder really where we're going with this and just how much of what we've seen already is actually going to be built upon. Really, the crux of this week's chapter is all on Nini Spangle. It's her turn to get some time in the spotlight now, and the entire chapter really is based around this member of her girl band group in Front London disappearing and then reappearing later on with apparently like almost murderous intentions and causing a bit of a fight. Where this is all going, I'm not entirely sure, but I guess that's kind of the point of this video, is to review the chapter and speculate. So, let's begin. We start off with another nice colour page. Apparently there's going to be a colour page every chapter, so that is really nice. Hopefully we'll get some different characters showcased later on, but for now, it's another picture of the 2 main girls, Noel and Nini, apparently eating some pie. Not entirely sure what that's all about, but the chapter title is called Ghillie Suit. Again, really not entirely sure what that has to do with anything in this week's chapter. I don't think anyone is necessarily under disguise here. They could be revealed to be later on, but for now, not entirely sure what that's all about. So the chapter opens with somebody watching the tabloid news on the TV, and basically what's going on here is actually kind of interesting. So they've taken the start of chapter 1, where Nini is getting angry at the people who are following her constantly, because she's obviously a celebrity in the real world, and they've taken that and they've warped that to her being angry with this band member called Macy Belger, who has apparently just up and left the band Cecil Die Twice for apparently no real reason, but the tabloids are spinning it to make it appear that her and Nini have had a big falling out. The TV the person is watching on then, the TV that this mysterious person is watching this news report on then just sort of blows up, and they thank somebody or something called Ellie for their fury that kind of matches their own. And obviously later on we'll find out who this person is, and the reason why the TV just happened to blow up is of course because this is in Front London and you can't see dragons in this world. So that's kind of a neat little visual trick that Kubo pulls at the start here. Now, after this, we get some nice world building regarding the dragons in Reverse London. Some really nice world building, in fact. I love seeing all the different kinds of dragons and how they're actually used and they integrate with Reverse London. We actually get to see Noel's apartment here in the middle of the town, and she's kind of like spending some time with these dragons. There are some like little flower pot dragons that are hanging from the windows. I love this sort of thing. It's very whimsical, and it really paints a great picture. Honestly, this is going to look so nice in the anime, I think. But Noel spends some time watering these dragons and making sure they all kind of get something in the morning. And you get to see some other kinds of dragons as well. There are dragons that help to boost radio waves. There are actual living bus dragons, which is probably the most Studio Ghibli thing I've seen in this series so far, that actually ferry residents around. And then also you get to find out the broom buggies as well, which are the dragon broomsticks, essentially, that the witches and wizards are allowed to use. Noel's is called Wordsworth. I love this. This thing has such a great design. I think I love its derpy face, but it brings her the newspaper, and this is where things start to kind of kick into gear. Now, obviously, Balgo is in this chapter again, and he continues to be my main sticking point with Burn the Witch. I feel like he's the reason the series sometimes feels like it's dragging its feet, in my opinion. The guy's shtick is basically the same thing in every scene he's in. He's either kind of just being an annoyance, or he's just being played up for laughs the whole time. And don't get me wrong, Osushi-chan is ridiculously cute, and probably the best character in the series so far. But that dog is not enough to necessarily make me happy to see Balgo. He's just kind of annoying, and he's not really doing a whole lot. In the pilot chapter, at the very least, Kubo had him kind of valiantly defending Nini from a Dark Dragon's attack. Here, so far, he hasn't really done anything. We're 2 chapters into this thing, and he just continues to... Kubo's got this thing that he loves to like drag out the comedy sections, and sometimes they can take up maybe more time than they necessarily should do. But we get this whole situation at the start of this chapter where Noel is looking after him because it's her week to do so, so they're kind of in the same apartment, and there's this, I like there's a curtain between them that says like close until you're dead or something on it, which is quite funny. But anyway, basically all this is that Nini is calling them up because she's raging about the fact that Noel has made it onto the front page of the Wingbind newspaper, basically kind of talking about her exploits and how, you know, she's been performing really well in the job, and how that you only get one of these kind of front page things every kind of a couple a year. And so Nini is raging about the fact that Noel made it on this time. Again, I get that Kubo likes his comedy, and Burn the Witch as a whole is definitely, as I mentioned in my review of last week's chapter, less serious overall than Bleach was, but it does kind of go on for a little bit too long, especially when pages are precious in this limited run series. But regardless, they eventually get called up by Billy Banks Jr., who is the leader of the Pipers division. Well, not the leader, but he's the leader of the first squad of Pipers. There's a lot of divisions in divisions here. We know that the Trombone Takinen is the leader of Pipers, but it seems like there are also divisions within the divisionception going on, and Billy Banks Jr. is now the leader of that one. Anyway, he calls them up on a Saturday, which they're not very happy with, but tells them that if they come into work, they'll get 5 times the pay and 5 times the achievement points because something big is going down and he really needs their help for it. Now, I really like Billy. I think he's a great character so far, and I really love his design as well. He's very much the Kisuke of this series so far, mixed with a little bit of Kyoraku, so that's a huge win in my book. But Kubo does seem to have made him a bit more jokey than he was in the pilot, and so far he hasn't really done anything to indicate that he's a particularly serious character. I'm really hoping that this is a bit of a deception thing going on here, and that Kubo, or hopefully Billy, will get involved in the latter 2 chapters of this story and do something really cool. But so far he's basically just their quest giver. He just gives them jobs and sends them out into the world. But he tells them that somebody is illegally rearing a dragon when they shouldn't have one, and obviously especially a regular human coming into contact with a dragon is a really bad thing. Now, as you guys pointed out to me in last week's review, I kind of got a bit confused as whether we were in reverse London or front London. That guy that Balgo was talking to, yeah, definitely a friend of his from reverse London. That makes a lot of sense. So basically everything so far is taking place pretty much in reverse London, apart from the very start of last week's chapter and the very start of this week's chapter that focus in on Nini's girl band. I did like the joke that Billy Banks Jr. was getting 5 times the pay like they are, but only to be there, just to tell them they've got a job. That was quite funny. Anyway, he sends the 2 of them off to try and find this illegally reared dragon, because rearing and the conservation of dragons does fall under the Pipers division kind of jobs, so it makes sense they'd be going out to do this. However, Billy tells them there's an additional order and they have to take Balgo with them. Now, there's definitely a smokescreen going on here. The reason for them taking Balgo does make sense. Apparently, him being a dragonclad, we know that this draws dragons to him, and they're expecting that to hopefully lure out this new illegal dragon. However, we know as readers that the Top of Horns want Balgo dead as of last chapter, so clearly they've sent this order down to try and lure Balgo out into the open and potentially eliminate him. Anyway, they make Balgo an honorary member of the Pipers by giving him one of the checkered shawls and also his own little pipe, which again is really nice, but it basically, so that kind of implies that the checkered shawl is the only real uniform of the Pipers, and so far we have seen all of them wearing it. Noel and Nini have it, and Billy wears it around his waist, but that's really kind of cool. That's a nice little thing that they've done there for Balgo, and it helps kind of make him feel more kind of connected to the main making them a main trio of Piper's division members. However, as they're kind of arguing about what to do and where to find this dragon, an explosion goes off at the local newspaper, The Realists. And apparently this is the tabloid newspaper of both reverse and front London. There's like obviously a reverse version of The Realists. But so there's an explosion going off there, and Ninny thinks it could just be the work. It could be the work of a terrorist, but they don't have to deal with that sort of thing. But Noel says that if it's the dragon causing this, they should get in there and get the achievement points. So Ninny ventures inside the Realist building to find out who the culprit is that caused this explosion, and it turns out to be her missing bandmate, Macy. And things kind of get a bit weird at this point on. This character acts almost, to me at least, like she's under some kind of trance, or that she's been deceived in some way. She mentions to Ninny that she doesn't like the fact that this company wrote a horrible story about Ninny, that she would disparage her bandmate Macy, and that she wanted to basically make them pay for the fact that they've written a story like this. And Ninny points out that actually Front London wrote that story, not Reverse London, so what are you doing here? And I do think this is kind of a really weird dynamic. How did Macy even make it to Reverse London in the first place? And apparently she's been told that if she destroys the building in Reverse London, it will destroy the one in Front London. So clearly something's going on here. To me, this whole setup seems a little flimsy. Macy basically says that because these guys wrote such a nasty story about Ninny, trying to turn them against each other, she's here to destroy the Realist building. It seems like a pretty sharp 180. Now, we do know from the very start of this chapter that it was Macy watching the TV, and her dragon, Ellie, which we see in a second, destroyed it out of rage. So she definitely is pretty angry at the tabloids, but I think somebody must be feeding her some kind of information about Reverse London, that they helped her get to Reverse London, and have told her to destroy this building, clearly to try and lure Balgo out. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Top of Horns did have something to do with this, especially since a character appears at the very end of this chapter. Anyway, Ninny directly asks Macy if she was the cause of the explosion, to which point Macy says, no, I wasn't. It was this thing here, and it's her dragon, Ellie. And this thing does actually look pretty cool. It looks quite sinister, actually, which I wasn't expecting at all. So far, at least, it doesn't appear to be a dark dragon, but it is definitely working with Macy to some degree. And I have to assume, again, that somebody supplied her with this dragon, but as Ninny points out, that her coming into contact with a dragon like this is a felony. Ninny basically tells Macy to hand the dragon over to her to try and avoid getting in serious trouble with the law, and that she's doing it for her own sake. But Macy kind of freaks out and says, you know, it was you who told me never to believe people when they say they're doing things for my sake. And the dragon tries to attack Ninny, but it gets shot in the face by Noel and goes flying backwards. So potentially this thing's actually not that powerful, at least not yet anyway. Anyway, this is where things get a bit weird, and I'm not sure if it's just being played up for laughs or if there is some kind of additional meaning to this, but Macy freaks out when Noel arrives, and she literally picks up a desk and just throws it at her. Now, Ninny claims this is because Macy has feelings for her, and apparently she goes crazy whenever she's being friendly with other women, but I'm not sure if this is just supposed to be a joke, that she can pick up a desk and just launch it like there's there's no weight to it whatsoever, or if maybe something else is going on here. I'm inclined to believe it is just supposed to be a sort of funny moment, but regardless, Ninny basically tells Noel to stay with Macy while she's going to go onto the roof of the building to try and get behind her and get the drop on her. However, the chapter now finally gets really interesting, and a plan of sorts reveals its true colours. Just as Ninny disappears over the top of the building, there is an enormous explosion that seems to have been directed directly at her, and she goes flying over the side of the building completely unconscious, her dragon sort of spiralling out of control as well. Noel manages to catch her at the last minute, and then somebody arrives on the scene. It's actually Bruno Bangknife, the leader of the Magic Circle division, revealed at the end of the last chapter, one of the members of Top of Horns. Now, he tells Ninny that he blew her out farther than he expected, so he definitely attacks her on purpose in this scene, and he says he hopes you're not dead, because otherwise he'd have to write up an instant report. And Noel obviously recognises this guy, as you would assume. She probably does know who all the Top of Horns members are. And like I said in the last chapter, Bruno looks a hell of a lot like Bazby, but he also looks a lot like Grimjo here as well. So I'm guessing Kubo does want to give off villainous vibes with this guy, and we know the Top of Horns are out to kill Balgo. And that's basically the chapter in its entirety. It ends pretty excitingly, Ninny being completely knocked out by a surprise attack by this Top of Horns member, who looks set to try and kill them all. I assume that's what he's here for anyway. He's definitely here to try and kill Balgo. And so you have to assume then that all this stuff with Macy, with the explosion, is a plan by the Top of Horns to lure these guys out. I have to say that despite Bruno suffering from same face syndrome with a couple of Kubo's older villains, I actually really like his design. I think he looks really, really cool, and I think he probably could go down as a bit of a fan favourite. So with the chapter done, I have to kind of wonder where this story is going in the last 2 chapters. A part of me wonders if all the Top of Horns members are not just going to show up for some kind of big battle royale just to try and kill Balgo. But the fact that they're doing this so brazenly and so out in the open, it seems a little bit weird to me, especially with the way they were presented at the end of last week's chapter as this sort of shadowy board of directors almost for like a big company. Now apparently Bruno's just going out there and attacking Nini in broad daylight, which is kind of weird. I don't know if they're going to maybe try and spin it somehow in the next chapter, but I am really excited to see where the story goes. I just really hope, again, that Kubo can maximise the potential of this exciting new world he's created. And he keeps introducing new characters, like Macy's a brand new character. I don't know how important she'll be moving on, as I do kind of assume she's just a pawn in the Top of Horns plan, but regardless, like I said, I'm excited to see where it goes in the future. I do kind of wonder what kind of situation Noel and Nini are going to end up in now. Potentially, maybe the Top of Horns will try and frame this as something they've done to arrest them and then separate them from Balgo. I could possibly see something like that happening. I'd be surprised if Noel and Nini have the power to take on these guys, especially if more of them do turn up and it's not just Bruno who's here. That would be really interesting to see. I'm kind of expecting some kind of a fight next week, hopefully. I'm not entirely sure how long next week's chapter is. This one was quite a bit shorter than the first week. But with that being said, like I said, I enjoyed the chapter. I just think a lot of pages, they could be used better. You know, there's a lot of Balgo-related shenanigans early on in the chapter, especially with already being 20 pages shorter than last week. I would just personally love to see more from this world that Kubo is creating, and he is doing a good job with the world building. I absolutely love the dragons. I love the one that's like the living bus. I think all that sort of thing is really, really clever, and I would love to see more from this. So yeah, I enjoyed the chapter. For me, it's a 3 out of 5. It really gets really interesting in the very last page. The stuff with Macy Beljaw is kind of weird, but also kind of intriguing. I'm definitely interested to see more. I think she's probably being played up a little bit, although she does have her own rage against the tabloids. But yeah, I'm very interested to see more about Bruno, what he can do next week, and hopefully other members of the Top of Horns show up as well, because I did love basically all of their designs. As a couple of you pointed out, they all have like stylized titles in their reveal chapter, and Sullivan Squire, her title definitely appears to be a reference to the Nazi Schutzstaffel, much like they were in the Vandenreich as well, which is really, really weird. Definitely a weird thing for Kubo to include, and she even kind of looks a bit like a Vandenreich member. So I'm very interested to see more about that character and what Kubo has in store for the leader of the Sabres division, but really I just want to see more of the Top of Horns in general. So seeing Bruno at the end of this chapter was a big highlight for me. Like I said, I think based on his design, he could go down as a fan favourite pretty quickly on. But yeah, not a huge amount to talk about this week. More on the dynamic between Noel and Nini, more on the world, but really the plot is not being advanced too far. So I hope next week we get a pretty explosive chapter. Alright guys, but that's it for this review of Burn the Witch Chapter 2. Let me know in the comments below, guys, what you thought of this week's chapter. Did you enjoy it? Do you want maybe more from this story? Or are you happy with what we've got so far? And who's your favourite character so far? I'd love to know. But what are you hoping for next week? Make sure to tell me in the comments below. Alright guys, but make sure to subscribe to my videos for more on Burn the Witch in the future, and Bleach, of course. And until next time, I'll see you then. Goodbye.